Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro. Now today's episode is coming to you from Melbourne, Victoria. So that's right, I'm away on holidays, and like any good professional, I use the opportunity to go and learn a little bit about what it is that I do. So Melbourne is a bit of a hotspot for water sensitive urban design in Australia. There's lots of stuff happening down here. The CRC, so the Co-operative Research Centre for Water Sensitive Cities, has a lot of stuff going on in Melbourne. It's been a spot where there's been a lot of research through Monash Uni into water sensitive urban design. And so I was coming down here and I was like, sweet, I'm going to use this opportunity to find out a little bit more about a few things that I've been interested in. And so just now, just like for the past hour and a half or so, I have been out on site with Simon Brink from Manningham City Council. So Manningham is one of the councils here in Melbourne, and I've been really curious about a project of theirs for a little while because about 24 months ago, I'm not exactly sure when, I started hearing of this project called ZAM WSUD. Now ZAM WSUD stands for Zero Additional Maintenance Water Sensitive Urban Design. So it was Manningham's attempt to build streetscape stormwater treatment systems, specifically bioretention systems, that weren't going to add any additional maintenance burden to what that street was already receiving. And if you know me, you'll know that maintenance is a real passion of mine, and trying to find practical ways that we can manage our stormwater, but also do it sustainably into the future. And by sustainably, I mean economically sustainably into the future. So ZAM WSUD, this attempt to implement stormwater treatment with no additional maintenance burden, was really interesting to me, because if we can answer the maintenance question, we're a long way to making this stuff economically sustainable. So I spent the past hour and a half or so out with Simon, and he showed me some of their stuff. And I'm going to use this video to show you one of the systems that he showed me, and to share with you some of my thoughts on it, some of the things that I learned. Because here's the thing, right? CRC for Water Sensitive Cities and Manningham have got a handbook on these things. If you go to the CRC for Water Sensitive Cities website, I think you'll find it in the technical guidelines section. You can do a bunch of research and find out about this stuff. So I'm not here necessarily to teach you exactly about these systems. So I want to share with you some practical observations or practical things that I learned about these systems that you can't really get unless you actually visit them. And that's what I want to share with you. So I'm going to spin this around. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's here, and then we're going to get into this, and I'll show you what I observed. So what we're looking at here, so the first thing you'll see is that these bioretention systems, and there is one square in the center of shot there, right? You can see the metal grate for letting water into the system. These bioretention systems are turfed, and that's one component to try and make these zero additional maintenance. So the whole focus here was, look, maintenance of stormwater treatment systems, you've got a few key tasks. One of those is vegetation management, so weeding, keeping the desirable veg alive. Another one is, over time, if sediment's beginning to be deposited on the surface, particularly fine sediment, what does that mean for the systems? Another one was kind of coarse material getting into the systems. So these systems are an attempt to deal with that. So if we start back up, let's approach this the way the water would approach it. So they're streetscape systems, so water flows down the catchment here. There's actually another one there. You might not be able to see it because of the sunlight and the shadows and that sort of thing. But anyway, water's flowing down the road, down the curb here. The first thing that water encounters are these little kind of scalloped out sections in the curb for trying to capture sediment. So that's one component of ZAM WSUD. Water keeps flowing down. Now obviously there are lots of trees around here, so there's lots of leaf litter on this particular system. Then as the inlet to these systems, we've got, or Manningham has got, I shouldn't say we, I have nothing to do with this. I'm just a very interested observer. Manningham has got these metal grates here. Now, what I learned from this is so far I think there are 14 of these systems installed around the city. This particular grate type has been used here, but there's other grates being used elsewhere. And I got the impression from talking to Simon that the other grate type, which isn't as slanted, might be preferred, but I could be wrong about that. Anyway, water gets into the system. So the grate is to stop litter and mainly stop litter getting into the system. And then you have the filter media area itself, which is this slight depression in the ground to collect some water. And you'll notice that it's turfed. So the intent here is that, well, because it's grass, eventually these might go out in front of people's houses, and they could just be mowed the way the verge is always mowed by the residents. Because in Australia, we've got this, even though strictly speaking the verge is owned by the council, we have this social norm where the residents who own the houses mow the verge outside their house. So the concept being, well, if we can put, you know, stormwater treatment systems in the verge that look like they're meant to be there. Because if we back up, you can barely notice that these ones are actually here. And we'll talk more about that in a sec. But you can barely tell that it's a stormwater treatment system. So concept number one of using the turf would be, well, if we can get the residents to mow it, then potentially it can, you know, no additional maintenance for council because it was there, because the resident would mow it anyway. And the same deal applies to these scallops here. So their intention, so I get the impression that in Victoria, they've seen a number of bioretention systems kind of clog up from fine sediment deposition on the surface, and that's caused a few problems. So the intent here is they've got these scallops to kind of slow down the water, drop out a little bit of the sediment in the front here. And what I learned about Manningham is they have quite, it sounds like quite a, you know, rigorous street sweeping program. So apparently the city gets swept on average once every 5 weeks. So we've got these scallops here to drop out the sediment in the curb in such a way that the street sweeper can come along and flicks that sediment out and captures it. Now in this particular instance, there's also a heck of a lot of leaf litter here that's, you know, playing its part in this and maybe blocking up the inlet a bit. So there's some lessons to be learned, because these were all a pilot, right? So we're talking about systems that were put in as a pilot to try and learn stuff, and they are actively learning. So that was part 2 of the zero additional maintenance. So I think there's heaps of potential here. But there's one other thing that's a little bit more hidden here, but was also worth exploring. So typically bioretention systems would have, you know, the gravel at the base with the pipe in it. They would have the transition layer of coarse sand. Then they'd have the filter media, which is a sandy loam, has some organics, but is, you know, quite sandy and loamy. And then you have the plants on top of that. But in these particular systems here, and I'm going to try and get in, they have a layer of about 100 mils, it varies between the different systems, but 100 mils of coarse sand on the surface here. And effectively what they're trying to do is future-proof, I'll just let the car go by. What they're trying to do is to future-proof clogging. So you have this really coarse sand so that if any fines do come into this system, they're not just going to form a mat over the surface. They're going to get caught in that first 100 mils or so and take it back over time towards what would be a standard bioretention filter media. Now I found this kind of quite interesting. My first question, of course, for Simon in this respect was, well, how are you installing this? How are you getting the turf in here? And so in these particular systems in installation, they've gone and bought in turf. It's come with dirt attached to the base of it, but they have over time, not over time, it's come with the dirt attached to it, but they've high pressure washed that off and then laid the turf over the top and then watered it in to get the plants established. And eventually the plant roots go down through the coarse sand and into the media beneath. So look, I found it really interesting. One other thing that I noticed here is that these particular systems are maybe a little bit shallow, so there's not a heck of a lot of depression from the invert of the curb, so the level of the curb down into the system itself. Perhaps the system could have been a little bit lower, but then there's this trade-off between, you know, the deeper you go, the more batters you need, the less it looks like it's meant to be there. Simon made a comment to me that in future systems, or I think in the new standards, you can see this curb here, how it's got a slope on one side of it, it's flat, then it's got a sheer drop off. There's a little bit of a trip hazard, so I think future ones have also got a slope on this side, so that, you know, you can't walk up and boom, trip yourself to so. But look, I was really interested to see these systems. I think I learned a bit. There was another one that Simon took me to, and look, I'm going to try and make a video for that. It might have to be a screen capture from some photos because there's some interesting stuff to learn there. But it was a system that was using the same principle of zero additional maintenance, but being done in a street where they were already going to do landscaping the street. So instead of turf, it's got, you know, your standard grasses and sedges that you would see in a bioretention system, because it was a site where they were going to put those sorts of things in anyway. So again, zero additional maintenance doesn't necessarily mean lowest maintenance, it just means no more than what we were prepared to do anyway. So in that site, they were going to do some landscaping, and they thought, well, okay, it's an appropriate site for stormwater treatment, we can get it to work there. Let's go and apply these principles. So it's an interesting site that's got the coarse sand on top and has some things happen to that. So keep an eye out for that video. I think I've just decided to make this a 2-part series, at least. So look, that's it for now. Oh, comment, turf. People will be sitting here going, but how well does turf treat stormwater? Well look, Monash Uni has done research into a couple of different species of turf for treating stormwater. Buffalo grass, I think is, palmetto is one type that they've researched. I think Simon said that this that you're seeing here is that buffalo grass, palmetto there. And it does, from the testing that's been done, seem to do a reasonable job in that respect. Oh, okay, right, yep, I'm thinking more things to share with you here. The other thing you'll notice here, particularly, and this will stand out, I think, to people from Queensland, if we back up a second, this system has got no under drainage flush out points. Except that it does. And they did something kind of nifty. I haven't got it 100% right, but I like the intent of this and I can definitely make it work in the future. So the outlet pit for this is down here, so I'll spin around so this makes sense. So there are in fact slotted ag pipe under drains underneath the system here. They're probably half a metre deep or so. And normally so they run horizontally along the base of the system to collect the water at the bottom, and then at the upstream end you put a 90-degree bend and bring that pipe up to the surface so that if it ever blocked out you could flush it out. And we see this heaps in Queensland where, because we're using PVC pipe, we come into the system, we see lots of PVC upstand sticking out 100, 150 mils above the surface. And that's always concerned me a little bit because I've seen heaps of them get kicked off or damaged, even if they've got like a concrete mass support around them. I've seen them get damaged. But what they've done here is really nifty. They do have those upstands, but they just left them 100 mil below the surface. And what they meant to do but didn't is they meant to mark the curb here in line with where the flush out points were. Because here's the thing, right? The flush out points there are there for like 10 years down the track. Maybe the thing's not drained, 20 years down the track. They're like a once in a blue moon maintenance thing. So you don't actually need to be able to get to them particularly easily. You just need to be able to get to them somehow down the track. So the point there was, they were like, well, we want this system to be mowed, so we can't possibly have them extending above the surface of the system. So we can either just not have them, or we can bury them. And if we mark the edge of the system, then we can come back and find them later. Now they haven't marked the system, although these are small enough that it's a fairly, you can look around the system, look at where it starts, and you go, look, it's a fairly good guess. I bet you they are right underneath there, right where you're looking. And so I think this is really useful because it also makes the system look better because it doesn't have any random PVC, pipe sticking out, which makes the resident go, what the heck is that? So again, that fits into this, not only zero additional maintenance, but just like congruent with what we're used to. So zero additional maintenance is, well, no more maintenance than what we were expecting anyway. And maybe we could extend this to what's the terminology I want to use? So I want to use the word congruent in this terminology. It's like visually congruent, let's say. So effectively, nothing to do with the system looks any different to what you'd expect if it were just the standard lawn. So if you had PVC flush out points here, suddenly it's like, oh, what's that? It kind of like it triggers something in the brain that goes, oh, that's weird. And possibly, makes people a little bit skeptical about it because they're not normal. But if you can hide the flush out points, it fits in better. It's more like what we're used to because it's just some grass. It just looks like a slightly low bit of turf, right? Now, but if you've got the marking on the edge of the system, you can find it in 10, 15, 20 years time whenever you actually need to find it, right? You can very easily with a shovel dig, because let's get back there. The flush out points are somewhere in this space that you can see in the camera here, which is about 2 shovel widths wide, roughly, right? They're somewhere in there. So you could very, very quickly, you have to be careful so you didn't damage them, but if you needed to dig those up, you could dig them up real quickly and unearth them and flush out the underdrains of this. And I think this is just a spectacularly good idea. And I'm really pleased that I remembered to share that with you. Okay, let's spin this around. So I've decided this is going to be a 2-part series. I'm not sure if I'm going to get back out to the other system to show you, or I'll just do it as a screen capture of some of my photos. But I hope you found this interesting, actually being able to see some of this ZAM WSUD concept. So the guideline's really useful. I would encourage you to go take a look at it. Again, you can get it from the Co-operative Research Centre for Water Sensitive Cities website. I think it's under like technical guidelines or something to that effect. I'd encourage you to have a look, but I also hope that this video has been useful because you've been able to see a couple of specifics in the real world as to what's going on. And I would love, I'm not going to have the opportunity, but I would encourage you, well, I would encourage you if you're in Melbourne to come and take a look. And I would love, although I'm not going to get the opportunity, to come out here in the wet and look at exactly what's happening with, the water and these sculpted out sections and the inlet and everything, because we can just learn so much from seeing stuff in the flesh. So I hope this has been useful for you, and I hope it's a useful companion to the ZAM WSUD guideline from the CRC and from Manningham Council. So look, that's it for now. A massive thank you from me to Simon Brink for showing me around these systems. He's really generous with his time, really generous with his thoughts. We had lots of good discussions about this sort of stuff, a whole bunch of other stormwatery type things. So Simon, thank you very much for taking the time to show me around. If anyone out there in internet land who's watching this wants to know more about what we do at Ideanthro, there's a few ways that you can find out. You can find us online at ideanthro.com. If you're curious about any of our videos, if you're like, wow, I want to know more about that, shoot us an email, leave a comment on YouTube or on Facebook. Let us know what you're interested in, and we will do our very best to make a video to answer that, or to explain that, or to delve into it, whatever the case may be. You can also, as I mentioned, you can find us on Facebook and on YouTube. But look, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great time. See ya.